Hello, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to tune in and welcome to today's webinar with our friends at Thomas International, entitled Managers at Breaking Point, a Leader's Perspective on 2025. So if you or your members of your team are at breaking point, you're in the right place. We all know how important engagement is to productivity and profitability, but with Gallup reporting that managers account for 70% of the variance in team engagement, it's a challenge that leaders need to focus on to build stronger connections across the organization. Pressure on managers continues to rise, so it's important for leaders to ensure that they're equipped to handle those demands so they can build engaged, high-performing teams. With us today to tell us all about doing that is Claire Dwight, Global Training Specialist at Thomas International. Claire has been with Thomas for more than 8 years, designing and delivering psychometric accreditation training alongside applied knowledge workshops. She also delivers international train-the-trainer courses for Thomas's global partners and is a BPS qualified practitioner, a certified online learning facilitator, and trains all Thomas assessments and applied learning modules for its global clients. And with her is Rob Shaw, co-founder of Meta Team. Rob is well known for his expertise in team development and performance optimization. He held leadership and transformation roles at Accenture and BT before founding his own consultancy, providing coaching for major corporations such as Aviva, HSBC, EQT, Jacobs, Legal & General, Unilever, and Vodafone. So you're in the right hands. Just before we start, you will see on your screen a question and answer widget through which you can ask questions and take part in the 2 polls we'll be running during the webinar. So please make sure you get involved and make use of that. Okay, enough of me. I'm now going to hand you over to our hosts to get us going.
Thank you, Ronnie. Just to say that I've actually worked with Rob before. He ran a team session for us as the Thomas trainers, which is incredibly valuable. So it's nice to be able to be sharing this webinar space with him today, because I know he's got so much knowledge and expertise to share with some of the issues that we're going to be talking about today. I myself used to be a manager. In my previous role, I worked at an automotive company and ran a team of about 12 people and dealt with all the challenges, but also the rewards that a managerial role can have. It is very, very hard to be a manager, but it can also be a wonderful role too. So it'll be good to explore some of those issues today. So yeah, I can highly recommend Rob's services and those of his company. So yeah, good to be sharing this webinar with you today, Rob.
Brilliant. Thanks, Claire. Lovely to see you again. And thanks, Ronnie. Good afternoon, good morning. Lovely to be here with you today. So I'm Rob. And yeah, I spend my days and nights working with team leaders and working with leaders in different sizes and shapes of teams around the world, really trying to drive how do we grow, in essence? How do we learn together? How do we grow? How do we deal with the challenges and obstacles of developing deep levels of engagement, of cohesion and collaboration in the teams we lead? So we're really happy to be here with you today and look forward to interacting with you over the next hour.
So a little bit about Thomas then. We've been around for over 40 years now. So we've got a great deal of expertise and experience with a variety of customers globally. Originally, we were created as a result of our PPA assessment back in 1981. And back in the day, it was very much paper and pencil assessments that were marked manually and the reports were typed up. Now, obviously, the assessments are available instantaneously, and we have a variety of assessments as well, and we're constantly creating assessments. So watch the space for 2025. We've got some very exciting new assessments that are going to be launched. And yeah, our assessments really help people to understand themselves, to understand others, to understand teams, and they enable us to self-reflect, raise our self-awareness, and then to adapt and become behaviorally agile should we need to do so. And I think that's one of the really important areas for managers and leaders, to be able to understand what makes them tick, to understand those that they manage and lead, and our assessments are a great starting point. They're not the be all and end all. There are many other things that we take into account when we manage and lead others, but starting from that kind of who I am, who my team members are, is a great place to start, and Thomas will help you to do that. One of the new functions you'll see there on the slide is that we've got an ethical AI tool. This has been a very exciting development over the past few months. It's quite fun to use, actually. You can go onto the site and find out, based on my results, what animal am I? What animal are we as a team? You know, what could we be described as? But on a more serious note, it enables managers to go in and ask questions of the system, such as, how can I engage this person? How can I motivate this person? How can I deal with collaboration with my team member? How would this person like to be onboarded? All these kind of practical elements that the tool can help with, which are absolutely essential for kind of the daily tasks that managers and leaders need to deal with. So yeah, absolutely love what I do, if you can't tell. Yeah, really excited to talk about how these assessments can help with the topic that we're discussing today. So thank you. Over to you, Rob.
Thanks, Claire. So Meta Team focuses pretty much solely on team dynamics. What happens when you get a crew of individuals together, and what magic can happen, and also what potential interference and disruption can happen to that group. So we partner with Thomas and sort of build from the level of depth and insight and the science behind their individual assessments, and then we work in that dynamic space. So our approach was kind of developed initially back with a Harvard professor, Bob Keegan, who's the professor of adult development theory, and his life's work was, how do we grow or not grow post-adolescence? So it's grounded in the work we did with Bob, and we also partnered with McKinsey and YSC, doing, bringing their data and their analytical insight to start the development of Meta Team's product. We have a global norm group. It's nothing like Thomas's. We haven't been running anywhere near as many years as the 40 years for Thomas, but we have 30,000 participants from different teams around the world that we have in our norm group. And similarly, we're used in multiple languages in pretty much every continent. And we believe in a profile and a reprofile. So we're passionate about the efficacy of the work we do with teams. So we do a reprofiling of where has the team moved from and to, and we've seen a performance and engagement uplifts of 20% plus. And we can often see that within 5 to 6 months when the work we does lands well. So which is fantastic. And in essence, it's driving cost-effective, really commercially relevant, and most importantly, really fast-acting team development. That's a bit about Meta Team. So what we'd love to do is go to the poll. So Ronnie, I'll just hand over to you. We'd love to get your feedback on this, please.
Yeah, so the poll's gone live now. We asked, what is the biggest challenge your managers are currently facing? Poll is still going on, by the way, so these answers are changing all the time. But currently, 33.3%, which is the highest vote, is burnout. It seems that's resonating with quite a few people here. Also, engagement, rather applicably, is just over 20%. As I said, it keeps changing here as I'm looking at it. But burnout is the one which is leading the pack at the moment.
Yeah, I'm not surprised actually. When you look at all the options there, if any of those are not being met, so there's poor communication, there's poor engagement, productivity is not great, performance isn't great, that's all going to lead into that burnout, right? If we don't have the strategies and coping mechanisms. So I'm not particularly shocked by that at all. I was actually going to guess that burnout would be the number one. I don't know what your experience would say there, Rob, but yeah, I'm not surprised at all.
Yeah, no, more and more teams and team leaders and leaders who we work with are really feeling it, right? I think it is the work at hand is demanding, draining, can be exhausting, and so that's the consequence of what you get, is that just being very depleted. So we see that time and time and time again. cross-culture, cross-sector, etc.
There's quite a big clue there, actually. Skills gaps is doing quite well in this poll. There's nearly 19%. So that could be feeding into that burnout and lack of engagement as well.
Absolutely. And the managers are very often the ones that have to pick up those skill gaps themselves. So as well as obviously their remit that they have to fulfill as a manager, sometimes they're the ones that have to plug those gaps in the teams that they manage with those lack of potential or particular skills, etc. So again, all these things can learn to people just feeling really exhausted and, you know, wondering why they do the job that they do. So it'd be good to approach that today and talk about some ideas we can help with.
Yeah, what's telling also is that productivity gaps, that's less than 4% of the vote here. So it's obviously not having too much of an impact on that because of the burnout thing, right? So that's why they're getting burnt out.
Yeah, I think there's just very constantly increasing expectations for me about productivity, performance, adapting to change at an accelerating rate. And I think there's just the degree of conscientiousness and focus, but the burnout and is such a important consequence of that. Okay, so shall we move on? Brilliant, thank you. Just wanted to share with you some kind of really relevant data points that we've picked up from various surveys. Ronnie talked about this, you know, managers account for 70% of the variance in engagement, which I think is profound. So, you know, almost 3/4 of the level of engagement that the people who work for us experience is based on how they're led. You know, 69% of managers, though, are uncomfortable communicating with their people. So you've got this kind of this contrast and conflict of how our manager leads is critically important for driving engagement. Yet almost the same percentage find it very difficult to communicate, and therefore, what does that cause? Right? I think that it causes one of the conditions for burnout. And there's a real practical commercial cost, right? And I think there's a really significant value at risk. Just how many employees actually leave their companies because of how they're being led, right? And the team they're a part of, 50%. And this 47% are feeling too overwhelmed just with their day-to-day work to really drive their duties effectively, to drive engagement, to drive performance, etc. So there's this absolute churning going on, it feels like, which is just really key. And you know, we see from our meta team data set just how many teams struggle with collaboration, how many just don't know what the blind spots are, and just how being pulled left, right, and center they feel, right? So, you know, 79%. And interestingly, in terms of the poll, but the external polls we've got for Microsoft, 53%, over half are feeling this burn. So we really have, I think it's fair to, my perspective of this, my opinion is we really do have a crisis, right? This is the ways of working are currently unsustainable, right? And so we have to start to think about how do we lean in, support, reframe, and adjust just the strain and tensions that are creating these burnout scenarios with our leaders.
Absolutely. Well, what strikes me as well when I'm delivering training to teams of managers, there's a few things here. There's first line managers, and we all know the Peter principle, where people are recruited because they're really good at a job, therefore they're put in a position managing others. So they need an extra set of support because it's essentially being thrown in the deep end, sink or swim. And some people do swim, some people thrive, but many others don't have what they need in order to fulfill that role. And then we've got people who are experienced managers, but because of all the kind of post-COVID, hybrid, remote working, lack of skills, they've got that extra level of pressure now, which I think it's almost become the new norm for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And you know, managers again who've been doing the role for a long time, but currently are just reassessing where they are happy, whether they're still as happy as they were when they first took on that managerial role. The good news is, you know, there are things we can do about this, even though this will resonate with a lot of people, especially, I talk about in training all the time about people don't leave jobs, they leave managers. And when I discuss that question and I ask people to kind of raise their hand, how many people have left a job, most people have. And managers really do set the tone. Managers really set out that level of communication, etc. So if it's not there, it can have a really detrimental effect. And the other thing is managers are very often the squished middle, right? They're having to deal with their team members' stresses. They become a receptacle of those stresses, etc. And they're also being squeezed top down as well. There's a lot of expectation on our managers within our organization. And, if they're not valued, if they don't feel they have a voice, if they don't feel, that what they're doing is truly worthwhile because they don't necessarily hear that message, again, that does lead to that burnout, that exhaustion, the kind of, why am I doing this role? But again, when the conditions are right and when you do have a voice and when you do feel engaged, it can be such a wonderful thing to be able to develop other people, to drive performance, to have a team that's engaged, etc. So again, it's becoming more and more critical as we think about the challenges that are upcoming in 2025, as well as those that we're currently dealing with now. And I know that you've seen that a lot, Rob, with the people that you've worked with as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And I think it's what's the prize? So my view is that we think we would all, everyone on the call we all know that our managers and our leaders are in essence the cultural glue, right? They are the vehicles, how we create shared values, how we create kind of healthy habits in the team, and how we build this sort of cohesive people first culture. So in essence, how we think as a group, how we act, the patterns of behavior that we demonstrate, and how that then sort of ripples through the patterns that get experienced and ultimately drives the levels of engagement in the organization. And we've talked about this. Our view is, the fun expectations are increasing significantly. And actually, our ability the ability of leaders and team leaders and managers, if you look forward in 2025, there's a gap created between ability and expectations. And that's the strain, right? That's the source of burnout. When expectations and abilities, when there's more overlap, actually that's where you can have the fun. And just my lived experience of working with lots of team leaders is there's not a lot of fun out there, right? There isn't that enjoyment and fulfillment and that sort of filling of the spirit in whatever shape or form that is for the team leaders that we're partnering with. And so I think that the key thing for us is, so the key question to answer against this context is, so how can we grow our managers' capacity and ability, right, to do this, shape the culture, to be the glue, to influence how team members make decisions, serve customers, clients, when we're not looking, right? And to really be coaching in the behaviors and the standards that we know drive engagement and performance.
I'm so glad you used the word fun, because sometimes, we can schedule something fun and some people's first reaction is, I've not got the energy for fun. I've not got time for fun. I need to do this, 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 and this. And the irony is, regardless of what the fun activity may be, very often it's simply just having a human connection with each other that's not about targets and performance and metrics that we have to measure ourselves by. And I know in my own team, our own managers at Thomas, they build in little fun things, little energy elements to our team meetings. And it can be as simple as, what song are you listening to this week? What's something that's made you smile this weekend? And just building that into the pattern of our kind of already existing meeting points can just be a little relaxation where we engage with each other as humans, because that's the thing, we're all humans. Yes, we all have targets, we all have performance metrics, but it's really important to be able to have a laugh, to be able to kind of relax together, just to talk about something that enables us to connect on that very, very human level, because managers and leaders are humans just like we all are. And sometimes opening up, being a little vulnerable, having that vulnerability to share something about ourselves in a kind of informal way can be a really great thing. That can be harder with a remote workforce, obviously. When we're not in a traditional 9 to 5 office environment, it can be a little bit harder to get people together and to, arrange times that are going to work for everybody. But it's definitely worth the effort, because when you've got a meeting, be it on Zoom or be it face to face, and people are smiling, it just automatically gets rid of some of that stress. Will it completely remove the stress? No. But if at least we can have a little bit of fun, a little bit of humor, connect on that human level, it's going to make, doing our day-to-day job a little bit more potentially, relaxing. That might be the wrong word, relaxing, but we can be a little bit more human with each other. And yeah, having that fun is so important, I think.
Yeah, I think fun is a critical part of the glue. I truly do. And it's when people are experiencing burnout and stress, it's difficult to access. Cool. So we're just thinking about glue and this sort of ability and expectations. Love to hear from you. What do you think is the most critical skill for your manager's future success? If you look into 2025, which of these really stand out for you that needs to get dialed up to help address the challenges that we've covered?
It's going to be really interesting to see these results. Obviously, that they're all going to be important. And again, I'm not sure what your perspective, Rob, is, but if I think back to when I was a manager, and we also, think about the statistic that most people leave an organization because of lack of development opportunities. Again, that's where the manager's responsibility is, to be able to drive performance, spot potential, and so on and so forth. And I actually think that coaching, we've got kind of qualified coaches that we can use in our business, but coaching ad hoc, kind of informally coaching as a manager, is absolutely critical.
I'm with you. I think, and also I'm drawn to adaptability, but actually adaptability can come when you have a really good coaching culture and coaching behaviors in the teams that you're a part of. Right. And I see them, they really come together. Ronnie, what are the scores?
Well, we've had quite a few votes for this one. Firstly, though, I'm just going to give you the final tally on the other poll that we did. Right. So what is the biggest challenge that your managers are currently facing? Yeah, I mean, it didn't really change much when it was live, but burnout, 34.8%, skills gaps, 18.6%, engagement, 19.7%, communication, 10.4%, productivity gaps, only 3.4%, wow, and performance, 12.7%. So, yes, engagement, burnout, the two notable responses there. On this current poll, which is still going, which skill is most critical for your manager's future success? And I don't know how teachable an attribute this is, but emotional intelligence, 37.8%. Yeah. Followed by communication, 25.2%. Adaptability, 16.5%. Coaching at 15.5%.
Mm-hmm. The emotional intelligence is really interesting, not particularly surprising, actually. And the good news is it can be taught, not in terms of changing who we are as people, but we can learn behaviorally to display greater levels of empathy, emotion regulation, and so on and so forth. And again, we do have assessments at Thomas that can be used to measure and predict that as well. And again, that goes back to Rob and I's point, I think, about, the human connection, the fun, for reminding ourselves that we're people. We're not just robots that are brought in just to produce productivity. So yeah, not really surprised at that emotional intelligence statistic.
It's really interesting. A lot of the work we do with teams can be actually about helping them with emotional regulation, especially when there's real pressure and strain and the stakes are really high for a team. How the team members respond to each other, to other stakeholders, other people in the system they work in is a really significant differentiator of performance and engagement and reducing burnout and stress. So we do quite a lot of work around emotional regulation actually in our part, which is very interesting.
It's funny talking of emotion regulation in the spirit of openness and honesty. That is my lowest score on the Thomas Emotional Intelligence measure, and it's something that I've always dealt with. But like I said, the good news is it's something that I struggle with sometimes, but I've learned coping techniques. And when I did become a manager, that was something that I really had to work on so that I didn't, respond too quickly, that I was able to go away and reflect before I came up with a decision. I'd write the email but not send it. And those little behavioral tricks and tips can make a huge difference in terms of our management responsibility and performance. But also, things like empathy, stress management, optimism. There are so many facets in our emotional intelligence assessment, Thomas, that can lead to those conversations about, okay, so you're currently a manager or you want to be a manager. Let's look at where you see yourself and let's look at where your potential areas for development are. Again, not to change who you are, but to be realistic in terms of, okay, what will be useful for you? What support can we give you as an organization? What do you need to be aware of as an individual that you will need to work on in order to be more effective as a manager, as a leader, etc. So that there is good news about emotional intelligence in terms of what we can do with that.
Thanks, Claire. How are the results looking, Ronnie? Then we'll just one final share, then we'll move on.
Swore I'd never do that. I was on mute. Oh, come on.
We all do it.
It's my perfect record gone. Yeah, I mean, people tend to set their stall out early with these polls, so it hasn't moved too much. So yeah, still emotional intelligence right out in front there with 38.3%. Again, communication 25.2%. Conflict resolution only garnered 5.6% of responses. I don't know if that's a good sign or meaning that people have got harmonious workplaces or that people are already well trained in conflict resolution, or a bad sign. I don't know. Perhaps you guys could shed more light on that. But yeah, only 5.6% for that. Coaching just under 15%.
I think it's sorry, I'll have a go at this one, Claire. I think the conflict resolution is really interesting. We do a lot of work with teams and leaders about how do you have the tough conversations, and how do you kind of, in essence, speak your truth with care with emotional intelligence, versus can it be a bit clobbering, which starts to be a bit non-functional, or actually can we dance around the issues? And the phrase we use is, can we be like a cat, like pussyfooting around something we're uncertain about? And actually both of those are what I would call non-functional. And actually the key enabler of having much more sort of functional kind of discussions around conflict is really enabled by higher levels of emotional intelligence and emotional regulation. So I can that would be my interpretation of why the results are what they are. So I think they're spot on.
Mm-hmm. My pessimistic side is wondering whether conflict resolution isn't as far up the list because people just aren't resolving conflict. That's kind of negative view of that, or whether people are so focused on creating a harmonious relationship with the team that they manage that it's not as big an issue. It's interesting though, and Patrick Lencioni, who I'm going to talk about a bit later on, talks about managers who want to promote an atmosphere where everybody is treated well, and we don't deal with difficult conflict because we want everyone to feel good. Ironically ends up creating a really toxic environment. So I think it's a really good skill to be able to deal with that. But you're right, it really does go hand in hand with that emotional intelligence piece as well, to be able to be objective with conflict resolution, to think about the person or the people involved. I think that's a good point there that you've made about the relationship between the two.
Thanks, Ronnie. So where do we go? So this is the Meta Teams high performing team model. And in essence, this is grounded in our field work and research with thousands of teams over the last 12 years. And what we found is the team leaders and the managers who are thriving, who are not in chaos, are continuously trying to master two games. And I think the really important is the two games, and they're always looping, right? This is never a we're done, but they're always trying to loop between these two games. We call them, one is the inner game, which is really how are we working as a team? What's the dynamics? What's the interplay? What's the relationships? How good are we at dealing with the tough conversations and trust? The resilience, I think, is really key in the inner game. We think resilience actually is a team sport, not an individual sport. So with the expectations and the complexity of working, the kind of concept of the rugged individual and I can tough this out just isn't sufficient to deal with the complexity and pace and challenges that teams are facing. So it's about how do we resource each other more fully to support the energy we need to do the work we need to do, right? In a game for us is also purpose, about the how strong is the purpose that we share as a team, and how strong is the mutual accountability to execute on that we share between us, right? Key things for the leader to focus in on. And then lastly, how do we then prioritize what we do and what we don't do? You know, part of burnout for me is there's just too much, and how able are we to say we're going to do this, we're not going to do that. And I see that time and time again. Can we do fewer better things is kind of a mantra a lot of the teams we work with are striving to do. But that requires high levels of trust, having the tough conversations, real energy and resilience, and being really clear about how priorities map to our purpose. So this inner game is foundational, but also our experience is it's not sufficient. So the inner game manifests in this outer game. So the outer game is, how does the team leader, how are they working with what's outside their team in a way that's really skillful and effective? How are they adapting to what's changing in the environment they're working? How agility for us is how much sort of innovation and creativity are they bringing to that external world that's making things better? What's the influence they have, and are they getting the support they need? Yeah, and then that kind of bundles up in how good are they at decision making and executing and having the driving for impact that they need to. So this inner and outer game is we found really, really fundamental, and the best team leaders are constantly trying to do the best of both. And just to show you, we just pulled some data. So this is just the last 40 teams we've worked with over the last few months. And you see the bottom axis is how well did these teams score at their inner game, and then the vertical axis is how well did they score against the outer game. And each dot is basically a team. And so you can see there's this really powerful relationship between how strong a team is at its inner game and how strong it is at its outer game. And so in essence, we've never come across a team which is good at one game and not the other. And conversely, we've never come across a team that's bad at one game and not the other. These two really go hand in hand, and there's this real balance. And our view is that to really help teams move up, and the sort of dotted line in essence is the correlation between those two. So you can see it's really strong. The teams that are in the top right quadrant, they're not experiencing burnout. They're not experiencing the stress. They're really thriving, right? They have good levels of engagement, great levels of performance, high levels of productivity. They're very cohesive. They're flying, right? And so the work we do at MetaTeam is like, how do we take a team on where you are and a team leader? How do we move you up that line, right? From either bottom left to top right. So when leaders can improve their ability of those 8 habits, you really start to see very, very fast shift up that line. Over to you, Claire.
So thank you for that, Rob. So we've talked a little bit about a few issues that have come out in terms of emotional intelligence, behavior, adaptability, and so on and so forth. Now, when we talk about assessing personality and behavior, so Thomas is a trusted provider. So we've got many years of science. We've got so many people in our team who are psychologists, psychometrists, etc., who've constantly updating our assessments, making sure that they do what we say they do. We're registered and certified with the British Psychological Society, European Federation of Psychologists Association, amongst many more as well. So the one thing about Thomas is, I just want to reiterate there that if you are looking at assessments, you're in very safe hands. Now, when it comes to managers, first of all, when we think about managers, most of us, when we think about burnout, we're probably not thinking of SLT at this point. We're probably thinking about those who are kind of people managers, maybe kind of middle managers, first line managers, etc. So those who are responsible usually for a group of people and that are measured on a variety of KPIs, tasks, targets, etc. And therefore, why is it important to assess personality and behavior? So our personality is who we are. And on that iceberg analogy there, we can see that we've got below the surface and above the surface. If we're talking about personality, we're going quite deep. We're going to a stable psychological construct. And our personality is a mixture of both genetics and our environment. And in terms of nature versus nurture, and it's, the percentage split on, what creates who we are, well, we're looking at both. We're looking at approximately 50-50. And our personality doesn't change much. Certain life experiences absolutely can have an impact on who we are, but generally we are who we are. And our personality does tend to stabilize around about mid-20s. There are different schools of thought on exact ages of stabilization. But because it is relatively stable, it is a fantastic foundation to be able to think about future performance, potential, and development activities. Now, from a company's point of view, if you assess personality, you are then able to tap into your workforce, your current workforce, external people you might be bringing into your organization, who could be the future managers and leaders, depending on how much time they need to plug that skills gap, get more experience, etc. But again, if we're looking at who we are, we're able then to tap into potential. And for succession planning and future-proofing our organization, personality is a fantastic place to start our assessments from. Personality also enables us to raise our self-awareness. So when we talk about emotional intelligence for leaders and managers and dealing with conflict, etc., if we look at our personality traits, we can see how we view ourselves in terms of things like how we deal with conflict, our approach to risk, our approach to ambiguity, how conscientious we are, and so on and so forth. And that is a beautiful foundation for them thinking about, okay, what do I need to work on? What's realistic for me? Why do I want to be a manager, first of all? If I want to be a manager, why is that? What is it that's driving me? And realistically, what timeline am I looking at? Am I ready now? Is it something that I want to aim towards in the next few years? So if you're having conversations with people, either coaching conversations or feedback conversations about somebody's results, it's a brilliant starting point. Now, personality being relatively stable, that doesn't mean that we can't work on our personality traits, but what we can work on is the behavior. And that's when we're going above the surface. And our behavior is visible. It's above the surface. It's the iceberg that is there to be seen. Our behavior can be worked on. We can learn how to be more assertive. We can learn how to have difficult conversations. We can learn how to deal with conflict. Our personality traits may not particularly enjoy those elements of certain managerial roles, but behaviorally, we can adapt and learn how to do that, which is, like I said, the really good news. Over the years I've been with Thomas, some of my favorite conversations have been with managers and looking at both these sets of results and also adding in emotional intelligence as well. And really digging deep with people in terms of, okay, tell me about your role. What do you love about it? What gives you a buzz at work? Is this the kind of role that you saw yourself in when you were younger? What do you enjoy? What do you still need to work on? And it's a really kind of powerful conversation to look at, who am I? How do I come across to others? And then what does that mean for the job that I want to do in the future, or the job that I'm doing now, but I just maybe want to get a little bit better at it? I need to dial up emotional resilience. I need to dial up resolution, etc. So all these things, assertiveness, optimism, stress management, it's an absolute treasure trove when we look at our personality and behavior assessments. Again, what it's not going to look at necessarily are things like what our CVs normally cover. So education, qualifications, experience. And this isn't to replace that. This is to add into it. But I personally think if we are ever feeling burnout, if we're ever feeling, exhausted, or we've stopped caring, or our empathy so much that we're taking our job home with us and it's affecting our well-being, let's go to those basics. Let's look at, how my empathy level is affecting my well-being, how my stress management is affecting my work-life balance, etc. And, there are many other assessments as well. So we can look at aptitude, we can look at emotional intelligence, but personality and behavior are an absolutely brilliant starting point to be able to allow our managers to talk. Now, that sounds very, very basic, but one of the things I would recommend after today, if you are a manager and you're starting to feel burnout, or you're already there, one of the worst things you can do is stay silent and to soak it all up. That is one of the worst things you can do. And I know, because I've been there. I've been through burnout, and I realized that I needed to kind of open up and say, I could really do with talking to somebody about these issues that I'm having with, lack of resilience, exhaustion, mental burnout. And again, these assessments can be a really good trigger, starting point to enable someone to have a voice and to talk about, this is what I'm struggling with, this is what I need. So basically, starting the conversation, enabling that communication for our managers. And that could be with their own direct leader, it could be with a member of SLT, it could be with HR, it could be with a mental health specialist, it could be with a coach. But find somebody who is going to be a good ear for you, and use these assessments maybe to start thinking about, I want to prevent burnout, or I'm actually feeling burnout at the moment, and I really want to do something about this. Because if we don't, it's just going to get worse potentially. And one of the great things from today is that you have a chance to take one of our assessments if you haven't already. So there's a QR code that's appeared on your screen now, and that will give you a free Thomas behavior assessment. And it is a fantastic starting point to look at your preferred behavior at work. It's not an ability assessment. There's no right or wrong. It's looking at our preferred behavior. So not what we can do, but what we prefer to do consistently. And it's a great starting point for things like how I communicate to others, what motivates me, what drives me, what I like to avoid, how I'm going to interact with other people. So for managers, it is a fantastic tool. And I always recommend, when I'm doing management and leadership training, for people to be brave and to share their results. Number one, you can do the spouse test. Share it with people that are close to you in your own life outside of work. But if you share it with your team, you're setting the tone of, we're going to be open, we're going to be honest, we're going to be vulnerable. And it's a really, really good starting point to maybe prevent feeling isolated and having that burnout. So I highly recommend that you all take the opportunity to do that by using that QR code there to scan.
Brilliant, Claire. I think for me, the build is, I agree, it's such a great first step to have that openness and sharing, and just building a level of appreciation and understanding of each other, and for the team leader to signal and role model. This is really important, and that creates for me the right foundations to talk about actually how can we now build off that. And I can anchor it with the emotional intelligence and the burnout challenge. I think the best response is, how do we as a group, as a team, strengthen our levels of resilience? And for me, I would go there about how do we really start to build and manage the levels of energy we have, right? Burnout is, the batteries run out of juice. How do we individually and collectively start to, recharge the battery? And that work, I think, is in terms of a priority for 2025, and based on the results, I'd say I think that is a really critical kind of call to action for us as HR professionals in this space to really drive in 2025.
I think what you said earlier, we are in a bit of a crisis. I think we have been for a while, but the stresses and strains of the economy, the global political situation, etc. But also from a more kind of day-to-day productivity or lack of skills gap that's come up a couple of times. That there are lots more pressures, and I think it's absolutely critical to deal with this sooner rather than later. One of the things that I just would like to mention, I alluded to Patrick Lencioni earlier, and his book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, is absolutely critical for managers to be able to think about that foundation that every team needs, which is trust. Now, managers very often are responsible for starting to build that trust if it's not quite there already. And that could be with a brand new team. It could be a manager who's joining a team who are already established. But it's always good for teams to kind of do a little bit of a health check and think about, what is our level of trust at the moment? So earlier on, I mentioned, a manager who shares their results. If you have that kind of psychological safety within a group of people who are then all happy to share their behavioral results, what a great start, because then we're acknowledging, okay, there's difference here. We're not all the same. There's not a kind of cookie cutter ideal team member here. So let's talk about who we are. Let's talk about our preferred communication, approach to conflict, and so on and so forth. And on the screen there, you've got some great questions for your managers to reflect on in terms of the levels of trust within the team that they're managed. So do people understand not everyone needs to have the same opinion? In fact, if we don't, that's great. Conflict can be a great thing. Conflict is simply a difference of opinion. And if we embrace conflict because we've got that foundation of trust, people feel safe to challenge each other, to admit to mistakes, to say, you know what, I don't think this is the right path for us. May I suggest something else? And so on and so forth. So challenging each other. And again, in a safe way, where we're challenging to grow, we're challenging to be more creative and to take risks. And making mistakes without judgment. We're not saying that, we want to provide an atmosphere where, mistakes are commonplace. It's not that, but, not having that kind of backstabbing culture, having that accountability where we say, you know what, I didn't do a good job there. You know what, we can do this in a better way. And if a manager does that, it is so powerful when a manager says, I screwed up, but let's learn from this and let's work together in terms of how we can be more productive going forwards. So cultivating the relationship, A, we can use our assessments, and B, focusing what Rob and I were talking about earlier, that fun, that human connection, and remembering to kind of sometimes take a little bit of breathing space and just enjoy each other's company and, just have a little bit of time to connect on that human level as well.
I declare just my build on that. I completely agree. We've also found that trust has a return on investment. We in our inner and outer game model, one of the most highly correlated relationships is between trust and speed of action and speed of execution. And once again, they're pretty much a straight line relationship. So in all of the hundreds of teams we've worked with, when trust is low, decision making, speed of execution is low, and the opposite is true. So deepening trust, deepening the team's ability to challenge each other, feeling you can take risks, that increases the speed that a team works at, which really starts to help to kind of deal with some of the burnout challenges. So it's a good place to start for a lot of teams as any, and the payback is really, really profound.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I think we're just going to wrap up. I'll just have a kickoff. I just think the work we're all doing is just how tough it is out there, and how tough it is for our leaders, and when we are leading and managing groups of people, and this expectations and ability and capacity and resilience and understanding is really challenging, I think, out in the businesses that we work in. So this, using the Thomas Insights and Meta team, this start by having just creating a much deeper understanding of us as individuals, of each other, and our interactions is just an incredibly important first step. And interested in your perspective, Claire, my view is the answer and the way forward is usually within us and the teams that we're part of. It's usually there. There's just stuff that gets in the way, or what we're not seeing, what we're not aware of. And actually just starting to remove that interference and increasing the quality of self-awareness is such a massive enabler of unlocking teams to move forward.
Absolutely. And that first point there, I think we sometimes forget to acknowledge that, our managers are doing a brilliant job. Like I said, they can set the tone for an organization. The culture of an organization can very much be led by our managers through their behavior, through their values, not values that are a sticker on the break room wall, that there's nothing wrong with that, but our managers and leaders who live out the values, who exemplify them. And, having that acknowledgement that my job can sometimes be really, really hard. It can also be really rewarding. And one of the things, somebody's posed a question to us about, advice for managers who are at breaking point. I would say part of the key takeaway today is do not stay silent. If you are feeling at breaking point, you need to talk to someone. What I used to do, I'd find another manager when I was a manager who was my buddy. And we were quite different, but I'd very often go to him and I'd say, could I just get your perspective? Am I overreacting? Am I reading this right? What would you do in this situation? You need somebody to talk to vent to. Again, you could go to the solutions that are offered by your organization, but do not stay silent. Acknowledge that it is tough. Acknowledge that you are struggling if you are struggling. And also, it's important to do that as a manager, because then you're exemplifying the behavior that you want your own team to lead with as well. But again, managers, you're kind of getting from both ends. You're getting the kind of, difficult stuff from your team, from the SLT down. Sometimes you don't get the positive feedback. So maybe start acknowledging what you're really good at, your successes. In team meetings, encourage your teams to talk about their successes, and don't forget to share yours as well. Our managers need feedback and positive reinforcement just as much as those that we're managing as well. But Rob, I have to ask if you could explain, don't spook the elephant. I'm absolutely desperate to hear about this.
I think it's with the context and environment that a lot of team leaders and teams are operating in is highly charged, burnout, strain, challenging expectations, etc. So it's very easy to intervene in a way that appears heavy-handed, and the group gets spooked and they kind of run off into the jungle, never to return. And so my experience is the way that team leaders can really help teams move through this is lots of just small steps. So take one small step at a time, one conversation at a time, one piece of awareness through psychometric insights, through building resilience, but looking at the energy levels. But it's these small steps that add up to make a difference. Coming in with anything too big, too time demanding, spooks the elephant, is my experience. And then you've lost. And it's very, very, very difficult to then get it back.
Fabulous. That makes sense. Thank you so much.
So thank you for staying with us. I'm just going to hand over to Ronnie for just if there are any questions that you have that we can try and respond to.
Yeah, we've had a few. I think Claire touched on one there, but I'll take these in no particular order. But Helen asks, how does the personality assessment software accommodate for neurodiversity?
Brilliant question. So neurodiversity is such a broad term, right? So we need to kind of drill down a little bit in terms of what we mean by that. There is a fantastic article that was written by our Thomas Science team about this, and maybe we could share this as an extra resource after the webinar today. Now, with personality assessments, there's no right or wrong, and it's a self-reflection. So the person is assessing themselves where they are. So it's not an ability assessment. It's not timed. There's no right or wrong answer. So in terms of neurodiversity and things like dyslexia, ADHD, autistic spectrum, it is that person's truth regardless. So the only time that we really need to be careful is when there are reasonable adjustments that need to be made. So one of our assessments is all about aptitude, and it is a test and it's timed. That one we have to be a bit careful about with things like dyslexia, dyspraxia, etc. But if somebody does their own personality assessment through Thomas, regardless of what neurodiversity they may have, it's their answers, it's their truth, and we still use it as a starting point for them to understand themselves, to have greater self-awareness, and to understand others. And it can actually be an incredibly valuable tool, for them to understand the team that they work with, and also how their team may see them, how they impact their team, and really give some great ideas for behavior modification. But yeah, our science team have done a lot of research on this recently, because it's such a hot topic and it's really, really important. And on our website, there's much more information as well, if you're thinking of giving someone one of these assessments.
Okay. Another question for you. How best does one manage a highly emotionally unstable manager?
So I think part one is with just very carefully, skillfully delivered feedback would be the starting point, is what I would suggest. So this is dial up that really strong coaching skill, and to just engage with them, meet them where the individual is, and share feedback and the perceived impact of that behavior on others. And I'd say that would be absolutely step one. And then it's my advice would be to say, let's start to get underneath the surface of the behavior and try and see what may be the triggers of it, and the mindsets or the hidden commitments that might be driving those reactions. So that would be my suggestion about how you could do that. That will be the first step, and recognize that this will take time, energy, and effort to really work through that.
Okay. I think we've probably got time for maybe one more. Depends how long we answer it. But this is more of an observation, but I feel there's a question within it. It says, I feel it must be challenging to access their emotional intelligence abilities and take a coaching approach when we are in a place of burnout. These two things for me are a big tension point for many managers right now.
Absolutely. I remember one of my biggest challenges with burnout was actually to do with my empathy level, which was too high. I was getting overly involved as a manager. I wasn't delegating, and I wasn't using the resources that were available to me. So I took it all on, I soaked it up, and it affected my life outside of work as well, because I was out of sync in terms of, professional and personal. So that really helped me when I did my emotional intelligence assessment and saw that the negative impact of high empathy is that you become a little bit of an emotional sponge, for want of a better word. And as a manager, sometimes you have to be very careful not to do that, and to use other resources in your organization and guide people towards those, because sometimes we feel like we have to fix everything. And this is what I mean about, sometimes managers, you're doing a great job, but also feel free to not try and do everything yourself, because that's what's going to lead to burnout, because we can't possibly do everything. So yeah, that definitely resonates with me, and I learned coping mechanisms of how to push people to resources that were going to be far more beneficial than just listening to me and me kind of empathizing with them.
Okay. One more quick one. What skills should we focus on our management and leadership development training in 2025 in order to better equip them?
I would say, I think really getting team leaders to focus in on energy and resilience. So how do we better lead our physical, mental, spiritual, emotional energy? I think is a very, very important priority based on the feedback we've got. So I'd say equipping our team leaders to manage energy, which I think helps recharge the battery, reduce the likelihood of burnout, and then other possibilities open up. But my view is that would be a must-do priority in 2025.
Okay. I think we genuinely have run out of time now. Thanks ever so much, Rob and Claire, for your great presentation today. The recording of this is available afterwards for any colleagues who you might want to recommend it to, missed out on it today. Great stuff, and there's links to follow up on after the webinar's finished as well. So thanks again, thanks everyone for joining us, and yeah, see you in the next one.
Thanks very much.